Hello. Hi. Hey guys, how are you? It's a cold day, so awesome turnout. In the morning, I emailed Ariel, asked, hey, it's really cold. Are we having it? Yep. All right, so my name is Nuwan. I'm Nuwan Bandara. I'm a solutions architect for WSO2. I'll give the mic to Nirmal.
Yeah, I'm Nirmal. I'm a senior lead solution engineer at WSO2.
All right, so WSO2 is an integration company, so we help organizations to integrate systems with systems. So, if you have a bunch of backend systems and you want to take some data from one system to another system, we have software to help you to do that. So we've been in that integration business for about almost 10 years now. We have a very solid open source platform. So all the software that we build are open source. If you're interested, just check out WSO2.com. We are also Ballerina evangelists, and two of us are Ballerina developers. We are the founding members of the Ballerina language. So we're doing some evangelism work in California, in New York, all over US and in the world. We presented Ballerina a couple of times in KubeCon this year and last year in Europe. So that's a bit of background. So there are some stickers on the table. So do check and put it in your laptop. Check it out. All right, so it's a new language. The obvious question is why another language, right? So I just want to check, do a quick poll and see how many of you guys are developers here. All right. So if you look at the past a little bit, what we've seen is that with increasing demand with a lot of organizations, that people have disaggregated the systems. So if you, since we listened to the talk by Liz and her colleague, we understood that they went to a container platform, they went to a Dockerized platform, and really broken down those application code that they had and moved to more of a cloud-native infrastructure, cloud-native platform, right? So that we see as a trend in the industry in computer science these days, right? So if you look at it, look at the recent past, there's a growing trend of growing endpoints. So if you see, there are a bunch of functions, all the code is disaggregated and exposed as APIs. So as developers, quick question. So how many of you today, when you develop an application, deal with APIs, right, in a day-to-day basis? Writing an application means today is integrating with a bunch of endpoints. Do you agree with that statement? All right. So how many of you use code to do that integration using code? Or there are other ways to do that. If you've heard of enterprise service buses, ETL software, workflow engines, there are certain softwares built to do that problem or solve that problem. So how many of you use the programming language? How many of you use a traditional middleware component? Software guys? How many guys use software? Okay, 2. All right, awesome. And using middleware like ESBs? Yeah, 2. All right. Okay, so what we've seen is with WSO2's experience, we have a bunch of middleware products, WSO2 ESB, WSO2 API Manager, etc. But what we've seen is when the application code is becoming cloud native, these traditional middleware components are dragging that agileness and holding you back. You can't really integrate to a CI/CD pipeline. You can't be really effective and ship your code fast enough. Right. So in one hand, we have those non-agile platforms like ESBs, BPN, workflow engines, and EAI software, right? On the other hand, we have languages, ubiquitous general purpose languages like Java, Spring Boot based, still Java, Spring Boot framework, JavaScript, Node, Go kind of languages, right? So those are general purpose languages, rock solid for general purposes. But if you are a developer today, and if you are writing your application to integrate and connect with endpoints, we believe that you need a different tool to be more productive. So we are identifying that as the integration gap. So if you are doing integration, the traditional software, the traditional platforms are slow and keeps you in the legacy field. If you're using the programming languages, they are not created for integration. So if you want to connect to API, you have to create a HTTP connection, do all that stuff, right? So what we thought is, hey, with that experience, let's develop a language to do integration. So the purpose of this language is just to do integration. All right, so that's the whole premise of what we did and why we are doing this. Okay. Why the name Ballerina, right? So everybody asks us. So in ballet, there is this concept called orchestration and choreography, right? You can apply the same two concepts in integration as well. So we orchestrate things, or when we do workflows, we do choreography, right? So that's the whole reason why we choose the name. The logo is the shoes. So if you made that connection. All right. Quick question again. When you're doing integration, there are a bunch of things that you need to think about, right? Have you, so you're programming a distributed system, right? So you can see in this slide, there are a bunch of things that we have listed down, like, transactions, circuit breaking, and all that stuff. In a general purpose language, if you're handling all these things, you have to bring a lot of frameworks into that software program that you're writing, right? So if you're writing and thinking about cloud native software, and if you want to put your code into a Docker container, that means a lot of boilerplate frameworks that you are bogging down to your container. Your container will be more than 250 megabytes, right? At that point, you should ask yourself, is it a container, or is it like a monolith you're putting into a container and put into the cloud, right? So that's another problem that we are trying to solve. All right, so I think enough talking. So I'll quickly write a program and show it to you. Okay, the question I wanted to ask. Okay, so let's assume now you as an integration, there are two integration developers that you want to come from. One integration developer want to communicate to another integration developer. This is the integration that I'm doing, right? How do you do it today? Can somebody answer that? I have a t-shirt on a water bottle. If there are two friends, two developers, you want to explain integration, one integration flow to another friend. How do you do it today? Modeling, some kind of notation. What type of a notation that you would use? UML, yes. So UML, but there's a specific diagram. So probably you'll draw a sequence diagram and show it to your friend, right? There are a bunch of actors. This actor talks this actor will respond with a response to that actor. So it's sequence diagram connectivity. Right, so let me just do a hello world. Nirmal will do a much more interesting thing, so I'll just take like 1 minute and show it to you. Sorry. So we've written plugins to VS Code and all the most popular IDEs. So you guys can choose whatever your favorite IDE is, right? So the extension is .dal. So I'll just do a quick import, Ballerina HTTP, and I'm importing the HTTP library. Then I'm creating a service, which is a natural thing that I want to do. I'm writing a service called hello on new HTTP and you give the port, which port you want to expose this. And then if it is a service, there has to be resources. So a resource, this might return an error. And we are not sure about that. That's why the question mark is. Then I'm creating a response. This method is called hi. Pretty simple. Then I'm sending that response back to the caller. So we have some funky syntax here, so I'll explain to you why we have like that. So this is very intuitive from the language syntax wise. So you can see service hello is on new HTTP listener, which is running on port 9090. There's a resource, a function called hi, and then there's the response. The response is hello world, and then I'm the caller, and caller is responding with the response. So that is why the arrow. All right. So once you do that, I'll do a return. Ballerina run hello.bar. This will compile and run service. Localhost 9090. Hello. Hi. It gives you hello world. All right. So why did I ask a question about that? Now, if you're doing an integration flow, how do you communicate to your friend? When you build this, when you write the code, this will automatically generate you a sequence diagram. So that's the beauty of this language, right? So the syntax is compatible with the graphical way of communicating. You can do the other way around as well. So you can edit this diagram, and if you add a worker, things like that, the code block will get auto-completed. So you can actually create a skeleton and then fill in the blanks. And you can use this diagram to communicate about this code. So the code documentation is not only words, especially because it is integration. You have a graphical way of communicating that integration flow. That's the whole premise and our advantage. And then there are a bunch of tools that we are building and have built and building these days to improve this experience. Yeah, so that's the hello world. I'll let Nirmal talk a little bit about doing a real integration flow. So we'll send a message to a Twitter and do a tweet now. And we'll also talk a little bit about how do you do stream processing and those kind of complex integration flows.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, great. So now we have the hello world running, right? So let's make it more, a bit tidy. So this is the same hello world that Nuwan just wrote by hand. So let's not initiate the HTTP listener here, but let's assign it to a variable and then keep it here as a placeholder. So let's copy this, and so in Ballerina you can basically assign variables. You can initiate new values, etc. So I'll create my service. That's my HTTP listener. It's a listener object, and then I'll instantiate it to listen to 9090 code, and then so in my service, hello service would be running on that particular listener. So I just need to specify my service here. So it's the same program, but with tightened up a bit so that it's clear, and I'll be using that in my future demo as well. So that's why I want to do that right now. Okay, so in Nuwan's Hello World, he had to use /hello/hi, right? So let's see how you can change the context, HTTP context of the service as well as the resources. So we have a concept of annotations. So you don't need to write everything by hand. You can use annotations to simplify the code, the experience that you get. So there's a service config annotation where you can define your base path here, and then basically make it / so that we don't need to call hello, but we call just / there, and then to the resource config, we can use again annotation to define the HTTP resource config, and there also we have path, so I'll make it / as well, and then the HTTP methods where you can restrict this particular resource to be listened on a particular set of defined HTTP methods instead of opening up the resource to any HTTP method. So here I'll basically make it a post request. So in one case, it was a get request, right? So let's make it more interesting. I will make it a post. In a post request, you can pass a payload to the HTTP service, right? So let's see how we can retrieve that payload. So the payload will be inside the request, right? So request dot get text payload would give you the string payload or the text payload of the past request. So let's assign this to a variable. So another interesting thing of the language is it doesn't allow you to define statements without really using it. So you have to assign it to a variable if you try to use some method or try to invoke some method. Okay, so that's still an error, right? So let's see what the error is. So the error is incompatible types, expected string, but found string or error. So this method apparently return either a string, or if it can't pass the payload, it will return an error. So what we can do is we can, if we are pretty sure that this would definitely return a string, we can lift the error from the code. So there's a special statement called check, special keyword, where you can lift the error, and then you don't need to handle the error. But if you want to handle the error, there's another syntax where you use but syntax where you handle both the string and the error differently. Okay, so we have the payload extracted from the request, right? Now let's try to do some interesting thing. So all of these is basically microservice building, right? This is how you would implement a microservice. But what about the integration? So when it comes to integration, I think the concept of connectors, where your developers can be really productive if they use connectors instead of writing everything from scratch. So they can basically reuse the same code. The learning curve is very minimal. So that's, WSO2 been in integration space, for many years right now. And we know for a fact that, in order to improve the developer productivity, you need to introduce these connectors to whatever the integration tool that you introduce. So, in Ballerina case, we have Ballerina Central, which is the repository where the Ballerina community push the connectors. So, if you are a Ballerina developer, you can basically build a connector using Ballerina and then push them into the Ballerina Central. So WSO2 is a contributor to the Ballerina Central project as well. So I'll show you from the command line how to basically search in Ballerina Central. So there's Ballerina search, and then you can basically search for a keyword. So this will search in the Ballerina Central and list down all the available connectors for you. So as you can see, there's a WSO2 Twitter connector as well as another contributors connector. So I'm going to pull the WSO2 Twitter connector as it's the one I'm familiar with. So let's pull it. So the command is again pretty straightforward. Ballerina pull WSO2/Twitter. So this would pull or download the Twitter connector from the Ballerina Central and add it to your local Ballerina runtime. So what does that mean is now I can basically import WSO2 Twitter package and then try to use the methods or the operations that would expose from this particular package. So I'm basically trying to do an integration scenario here where I'm trying to push some tweets into Twitter. So, you probably know that in order to do that, Twitter, you need to go and register in apps.twitter.com and get, O2 credentials. So I've already obtained that, and I don't want to paste it, right in the code here. So I've basically pasted it in a configuration file. So Ballerina can basically read from configuration files as well. So we mainly support TOML files. Have you heard of TOML before? It's basically a improvement from YAML. Where in YAML you have to keep indentations, right? But in TOML file you don't have to have indentations. There are different ways of defining arrays and all this. So it's the most famous configuration language right now. So Ballerina basically support that as well. So I'm going to import that as well here. And then I'm going to instantiate a Twitter client. So now we are going to call the Twitter API. So there should, us, the Ballerina program here is a Twitter client. So from the Twitter package, the Twitter client, we can instantiate that and then basically name it as Twitter. And then let me copy the definition because we have to use all the configurations. We have to pass all the configurations in order to instantiate this. Okay, so if you see this, it's just a matter of instantiating the Twitter client object. In order to instantiate, you have to pass client ID, secret. Those are the things I've obtained from the Twitter apps.twitter.com. Okay, so now we have instantiated the Twitter client. That means we can use the Twitter client here and do tweet, right? So let's use the Twitter. And as Nuwan explained, so in Ballerina, there's two main concepts when it comes to calling functions. So in this case, it's a request.get text payload. That's a local function, right? That's not a network call. But in the Twitter API case, it's a network call where you have to send a message out through the wire. So it is differentiated using the arrow. So if it's a network call, it is represented as an arrow. So we're going to tweet the payload. And again, this is just a statement. You can't keep it as it is. You have to basically use the return value. And so I'm going to assign it to the Twitter status. Tweet would return a status. So let's use it like this. And if you read the error, it at the end returns a status and an error. So I don't want to handle the error right now. I'm going to use the check operation, right? So I have the status now. So let's basically try to, okay, before we tweet, let's try to improve this a bit. Now let's do some transformation before we send it to the Twitter, as well as, before we send the response back to the client. So here I'm trying to do a very simple transformation where I'm just checking the content of the payload, whether it has any hashtags mainly. And if it does not have any hashtag, let's try to add a hashtag. So this is a real live demo. So we're gonna tweet using the Kubernetes and hashtag as well as Ballerina hashtag. Okay, so this is the pre-transformation where you transform before you send it out to the Twitter API. Now, what about post-transformation? Let's do some post-transformation as well. So as Nuwan explained in his slides, JSON, XML, all these are native types or types in the language. You don't need to export any library or use any custom library. JSON is a type itself. Like if you use Java, string is a type, right? Primitive type. So in Ballerina, JSON is a type in the language itself. So you don't need to export any libraries or anything like that. So you can just instantiate a new JSON. So let's see, instantiate a new JSON and type the JSON inline. So I'll basically have the ID and then status.id, and then I'll make agent as Ballerina. Okay, so this is a simple JSON. I'm going to basically send it out to my client. So I have to close this and let's send it as it is to the client. So previously in the hello world case, we got a text response. Now we should get a JSON response, right? Again, so there's an error here. Let's see what is the error is. Error is tainted value passed to sensitive parameter payload. So, this is another cool feature of Ballerina, built-in support for secure development. So as a developer, you often miss to protect or secure your request parameters, right? So for an example, imagine in this case we are getting the payload from a third party person who did not our service, right? If we directly use it as it is and pass it to a SQL database, then it's basically an opening for a SQL injection, right? So you have to basically protect or sanitize this payload before you pass it to or use it within your integration core. So the language itself detects that for you. You don't need to do anything. So this, but in this case, I'm pretty sure this, I'm sending this response request. So I'm pretty sure I'm not going to attack anything. So I'm telling the language that this particular payload that I received is basically can be trusted. It's an untainted payload. So there's a keyword in language called untaint, where you can define, once you sanitize this, you can say, okay, now I have sanitized the payload or the object. You can safely assume that is untainted. Okay, so I think we have, I hope I have done everything correctly. So let's try to invoke this and see. Right, so I'm clearing this up. So remember I said I've added my client credentials, all these WSO2 credentials into a config file, right? Now where is the config file? So if you check my project, I have this Twitter TOML file that has all the config file. all the configurations. So I need to pass that when I invoke this service. So I'm going to do Ballerina run config and pass the Twitter toml file, and then basically invoke the okay, so the service started. Hopefully it will work as well. So now it is a bit different than the hello service. It's a post request, and we have to pass a message to it. So I'll basically Ballerina live demo, and then we have to basically send it to localhost 9090. We don't need to use any hello, hi, paths, since we use the annotations to drop all the paths, right? Okay, so it worked. We got ID. So let's go and check in the Twitter. So I didn't have any tweets. Okay, so now you can see there's a tweet, Ballerina live demo, with the hashtags. So since I didn't have any hashtags, it has been added by the integration logic. Okay, so that's basically the Twitter or the integration demo. So the other important aspect of the language is it is cloud native. So what does cloud native means? It doesn't mean that you can run any Ballerina service as a container. That's not what it means. In Ballerina context, what it means is Ballerina will build you or provide you all the Kubernetes artifacts, Docker artifacts, everything by just specifying set of annotations. Even without annotations, it would build you with some default values, all these artifacts. So that's what you call really cloud native, where you don't need to write those YAML files. By simple command, Ballerina would be able to build all these artifacts for you. So let's see how it works. So I'm using the same program, but I have some additional things. So if you can recall, I took the listener part out from the service definition, so that this is the reason for doing that, so that I can basically define the Kubernetes service annotation to this particular listener. So, if you are familiar with Kubernetes, you should know in a Kubernetes service, there's node port service type. That's just one type of it, so that I can access the service from the host machine. And then I just give a name to it. So Ballerina will be automatically generating a Kubernetes service YAML file from this config. Okay, so that's my Kubernetes service. And then I have Kubernetes deployment and Kubernetes config map on my service, on my real integration service. So this part means the Kubernetes deployment file, where you create all the pods, all the Docker images for this particular service. So I have the image, that's Docker image name, and then this is the name for the deployment configuration. And then since we are using a config file, we have to basically pass or use the Kubernetes config map, right? So of course, you can use Kubernetes secrets as well, since this contains credentials. But to simplicity, I'm not using that. But all these annotations are supported by the language for all the Kubernetes artifacts. Okay, so I have configured all the necessary things so that I can basically automatically generate. I mean, I can ask Ballerina to automatically generate the Kubernetes files. So let's expand this a bit. So Ballerina has a build command where you would first build these Kubernetes artifacts. In this case, you would not run anything. You would build the artifacts first. So this, as you can see, this would basically generate Kubernetes service, Kubernetes config map, deployment, Docker, Helm files, all these necessary Kubernetes artifacts. So now, if we check this particular folder, there's a subfolder called Kubernetes, which has the Kubernetes demo YAML that basically contains the Kubernetes files. If I show you that. So this, this looks familiar if you are using Kubernetes already. So these are the service, these are the config maps, these are the deployment files, pods, everything, config file, everything. Right. So now, if you are familiar with Kubernetes, you have to use kubectl command and apply -f Kubernetes folder, and this would basically create the Kubernetes artifacts for you. Let's see whether it created. Okay, you can see there's a Ballerina demo created just 10 seconds ago, and then let's see whether we have a service as well. Okay, so we have the service as well. It's a node port one, and it's running on 309942. So let's try to invoke it. So we are basically using the same command, but now the port should be this, since we are running on Kubernetes. And let me change the tweet. Kubernetes or something like that. Okay, so I think I tweeted. Now you can see there's another tweet that is from our Kubernetes runtime. Now it's not running on my local environment, but it is running in my Kubernetes cluster. So that's basically the demo part of it, but I just wanted to finish this discussion by showing you guys the ballerina.io website. So this is our website. It is pretty intuitive, and it's content, not like a very new language where you don't find any documentation, where you don't find any resources to get yourself started. But this has all the things. We have worked on this for last 3 years, and even though it is announced only last year, this was a lot of internal work that we were doing throughout past years. So we have the learn section where you can learn Ballerina, and Ballerina has inbuilt testing capabilities. Testing using annotations. Testing is defined in the language. Documentation. You can generate documentation, using markdown files using the language itself, and the streaming capability as well. So if any of you are familiar with complex event processing or streaming integration, Ballerina has a native support for streaming integration, where you can simply, using the language itself, you can write simple queries. Not simple, I'd say, but you can write queries where you can do real-time processing using the integration language. So this is a sample query where you basically detect you listen to a sensor stream and then detect when the temperature is high. And I think that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. So so if you go to this page, there's something called Ballerina Guide, BBG, Ballerina by Guide. So that has second one. Yes. There are a lot of a lot of integration scenarios, like RESTful service is the most basic one, service composition, asynchronous invocation, parallel service orchestration, and things like that. So forking things, joining streams, all those things can be done inside the language itself, and language is built to do that. So this is a very good place to start. Everything is explained how to do it, and then there is a Kubernetes definitions, how to create a Kubernetes artifact or deployment, and then deploy it in Kubernetes. The Ballerina by example is explaining all the constructs as it is, like objects, primitive types, arrays, values, tuples, all those kind of things. Yeah, I mean, what we ask from you is involved with the community. It's a growing community. We have almost 200 contributors right now. It was a big hit during KubeCon this year. And we are super excited because everything is moving towards cloud native development. We feel there is this space, there's a vacuum that you need when you are building integration. So that's what we are trying to fill. So we want everybody to get involved in GitHub, fully open source and Apache 2 license, very non-restrictive license at all. So anybody can, get involved. Yeah, any questions?
Where are you seeing adoption so far?
It's pretty good. So we already have 4 production customers. So because a lot of languages start as research projects and evolve for 10 years kind of time frame. But because we are an integration company and since we started like that, we wanted to build a production ready platform from day one. So we already asked a couple of our existing customers to use Ballerina, so they loved it. So we can openly say that Motorola and HP are using it in production right now, and a lot of other customers are interested and working on it. These are some traction that we've got during KubeCon booth. You can see some tweets. We are planning to contribute this to CNCF probably mid this year, so it will be a CNCF project, an official project. We are doing a bit of language tweaking these days. Yeah, so co-development team is in Mountain View in California, and there is a larger team in Colombo, Sri Lanka. Yeah. Yes.
Is Kubernetes a library in the language, or is it actually part of the language?
It is a part of the language. So there are core libraries like standard libraries, and then there are extension libraries. So that's part. Kubernetes is part of that.
Okay, so if you want to maybe take Roku, for example, you pull in.
Yeah. You can, yes, exactly. So Nirmal talked about the Ballerina Central. So if you go to ballerina.io, what you'll do is you'll write a Heroku package and push it to Central, and then like Nirmal pulled the Twitter package, you can pull that package and use it. So yeah, so we already written kubeless packages and different other packages to integrate the different systems.
The packages, are you guys like, are you betting on, like, what's the process for
right, the governance model, right? So we don't have that type of strict checking right now. It's a community-driven thing, so you can push it. It's like Docker Hub, right? So you can search for many Docker containers. You can see what's best, what suits you, who supports it, those kinds of things.
So I think users would rate it.
Yeah,
with those good connectors up. So that's probably the way we foresee it. Yeah.
We don't want to control it right now, so we really don't want to be the controlling authority. That's a slippery slope. So let it be. Users will themselves govern it using ratings and comments. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we are talking with CNCF these days on creating a proposal and submitting it. Yeah, planning on that.
I think we need like a customer or the.
I'm personally not involved with the process, but there is a bit of a lengthy process where we have to submit it and then get vetting, and there are some mentors associated. Then it will be like an incubator project first, and that process.
Like production customers
are
used to graduate.
Yes. Yeah.
Could Ballerina be used in browser environment?
Well, it's a good, interesting project. So if you want to build some library like React or something around Ballerina, that's awesome. We don't have anything right now. Right now, it is just a back-end integration language. Right now, it's Java. Well, we have our own compiler on Java. It's running on JVM. That is something that we are thinking of writing a custom LLVM-based implementation. So there will be a native compiled version as well. Possibly. If you are interested in contributing, I can connect you with some of the code developers of the language. Yep.
Java or
so
it gets compiled into the bytecode. So it's not a Java file that would get a Java compilation file that would get. It's not Java bytecode.
It's not Java bytecode. We have our own custom bytecode format. So we compile the BAL file directly into bytecode. We don't have the intermediate state like if you work with Rhino like library in Java. What Rhino does is it takes a JavaScript file, convert it to Java, and then convert it to bytecode. We don't do that. We convert directly into bytecode and write in JVM. But right now it is a JVM language, so you need the JVM. We want to get rid of that dependency because we want to be in the sub-millisecond boot time in Docker container world. So we are in Midtown, so if you guys, we do hackathons and stuff like that. Just follow in Twitter. We like to, hang out, do hackathons and have beer. Stuff like that.
Yeah. Play around.
Yeah.
Right. Cool. Thank you guys.
Thanks for hosting.